Yes, like I said at the outset, this bit is very much about you guys, really, and I really just want to kind of throw it open right at the start. Really, has anybody got any questions?
Yeah, I've got one.
Yeah, can we get a mic down? Yeah, please. Thank you.
Many moons ago, I think it was early 90s, I went to the first shindig, and probably longer than I would care to imagine ago, I went to the first Creamfields. And as events sort of organisers, festival directors, call it what you will, to what extent do you sort of move with your audience, and to what extent do you sort of stick with your sort of core event concept?
Well,
because I certainly wouldn't be there now.
yeah, I think sort of Cream and Creamfields is sort of like a game of two halves in a way. I mean, obviously, we ran a successful nightclub throughout the 90s, launched the festival towards the end of the 90s, and pretty much anyone that came to the club came to the festival. But with time, obviously, I'm not sure how old you are, but I'm in my 40s now, so the vast majority of the audience that came to Creamfields in 1998 are now married with kids and probably not going out as much. So I think it was vital for us to sort of remain sort of focused in the 18 to 22 age group in order to keep this festival moving in a positive way for so many years. And apart from sort of the middle of the 90s, when I think we were probably in a transition really between those two sort of generations of clubbers and festival goers. We've pretty much stayed there. Like a couple of years ago, we saw a big jump in terms of people coming to the festival for the first time, which is music to my ears. And also, what was also music to my ears was that a large portion of those people were coming to a festival for the first time. So what that told me was that we were still relevant today as we was 12 years ago, and what that also told me was that actually dance music was once again becoming a major player in the festival market. So it's regrettably, the truth is that you have to sort of move with the times, and you have to appeal to a younger audience in order to sort of continue to sort of be at the forefront of music and be at the forefront of festivals. So all of my friends and all of the people I remember from back in the day, only a handful of them come to the festival now, and actually they're all new kids, which is great. As a businessman and as a festival organiser, that's what you want to see. A key one for us a couple of years ago was when we did our second two-day festival, was just how many young kids were there, and they were there to see all the new acts like Dizzy Rascal at the time, Calvin Harris, Deadmau5, and people like that, who were sort of all new entrants into making dance music. So we want to stay there for as long as possible and still appeal to a young audience.
I think for us, just to answer that question, it's the same. I mean, I'm not involved with Shindig anymore, but I'm still very good friends with the two guys who remain. But we're like a little extended family in Newcastle, even with our businesses. So like I'm a generator, I run Evolution. The guy who works with us in Evolution, Dave Stone, runs Digital Newcastle, Digital Brighton, and he's got a really strong team of young people around him who can spot talent and he puts a lot of shows on, individual shows. So this year, he'll have already put on Jamie Woon, Claire Maguire, that sort of stuff, the stuff that's coming through now, so he's got a really good eye for it. But we listen to a lot of people, and I think, what helps me is having a 14-year-old son who's really keen on music as well. He is my focus group, so that's really helpful as well, you know what I mean?
Top tip, festival organisers, have kids. Any other questions? Yep, great.
Cheers. It's a bit of a comment and then there's a question. I work on tram lines in Sheffield, which is a free festival, so that's obviously one way of solving the ticket price issue by not charging anything. Been fortunate to, a lot of the funding came from Sheffield Council, who understood the importance for the local economy, going back to that issue about the economic impact. We've been fortunate enough to get, this is a kind of sponsorship point, sponsorship for Nokia this year, and the Nokia money in a sense is replacing the money the council's cutting. What's interesting about that, I mean obviously the DOSH is very helpful, but there's ways in which, you know, I was saying before, you don't always get money, but there's ways in which that relationship is going to help us, because it's a 70 venue festival, which makes it very, very difficult for people to know what's going on. So Nokia are writing an app, which obviously it can go on Nokia phones and other phones. That's going to be very useful because it's just going to solve the problem for what the bloody hell's going on at 5:30 where I am right now. But it will also give us, hopefully, in years to come, advertising opportunities on that app. So in a sense, it's a potential revenue earner. So I mean, I guess that's one way in which a sponsor can be useful. But the other point really was about concessions, and I think, I just wonder if you've got this experience, how much a festival can become more interesting and more diverse without taking on any or much extra costs. So just a couple of examples. We've got a buskers bus, which is just a free bus that goes around Sheffield during the festival, and a bunch of musicians collective basically programme that, and it's completely free, doesn't cost anything. But actually a lot of the feedback last year, a lot of people really liked that because it was really quirky. They got on a bus and somebody played right in their face to them, and it just brought a nice vibe, and it didn't really matter that it wasn't a big line act, because it just worked. And the other thing we're doing this year, is, which I'm sure some other festivals do, is get our own beer brewed, and get the pubs to stock it. And the profit on that is paying for a blues trail, a blues festival within the festival. And I think once you've got your headlines and it's not about the names, I'm just interested if you've got ways of adding interest to your festivals which don't actually involve much more expenditure, adding on little self-contained modules in a sense which pay for themselves but also diversify the attraction of the festival. So that was the question.
Anybody got?
Yeah, I think you know, I'm aware of Tramlines and know what Tramlines is, and I think, you know, Tramlines is a great event, and I think some of the things that you just said there are obviously, you know, the buskers bus and the brewery thing, and getting that into the pubs is really good. I'm not so sure the sort of events that largely, I mean, Holly might have an opinion on this because she does a fringe event, but the sort of events we do, that's different, because getting it across the pubs, hasn't got the same relevance as us being on a site in some cases, not in my case, but in some cases, in the middle of nowhere, do you know what I mean, and having that, but I do know that other festival promoters do have real ale tents and their own beer brewed, and they do deals with the breweries on that, and it's just a quirky way. But it's interesting, I think you're right, you do have to be very creative with your festival, and we do bring in other attractions and other things, not necessarily fairgrounds, but other attractions and other interesting things, and do other things like Festival. Start a thing that a lot of people copied, that on a Saturday it was all fancy dress, and you've got to come and dress up in fancy dress, and just silly little things like that. And I think to get repeat custom, you've got to make your event memorable. I think, you know, you've got to do things that people do enjoy and can get involved in and interact with, and what have you. Yeah.
Something that Fringe, Brighton and Edinburgh have done. I mean, I don't know if has anyone been to the Edinburgh Fringe? So you might have seen Fringe Sunday, which was basically a free event for the city, and it attracted hundreds of thousands of people, and lots of acts were on, free stages, etc. It cost the festival a fortune to put on, and after the recession started, they decided they were going to scrap it. So I'm kind of talking about the opposite to what they put it on, thinking it was a good idea to bring more people in and advertise the festival for free. But actually, I think you need to be careful of having things that will detract from your, obviously not you, yours is free, but from your ticket sales, particularly for festivals that are not wristbanded or weekenders. They cancelled it. In Edinburgh they cancelled it, and they said all of the venues and performers were like, you know what, as particularly the venues, they were like, thank God for that, because on Fringe Sunday nobody goes to the theatres, and actually they lose money on that day. In Brighton they started Fringe City, which is a similar idea. It's like the High Street in Edinburgh, so you've got the free stages, and actually that was sponsored, so it paid for itself. It was very, very sponsorable. It didn't bring any extra income in. It was it totally, you know, leveled out, and it didn't really. It sold tickets because you could do free events on stages and things like that. But what it does is, if you're running a Fringe or that kind of a festival, what it does is bring in a bigger sell to your performers. So it gives them a reason to come. So they're not just in their one theatre, but actually they have got free publicity every day or every Saturday that they can go out, they can fly and things like that. So I think there's two ways of looking at it. Make sure that if you do it, that it doesn't stop ticket sales, but at the same time bring something more to your performers and audience as well.
Thank you. Can I just ask, actually, I'm really pleased to hear you got the Nokia sponsorship, because I know things are very tough, particularly with regards to festivals which do attract an element of public funding. What would you have done if you hadn't had that money coming from Nokia? What would you plan?
We did have a plan B, which was a smaller festival. I mean, there is still money from the council this year, which is quite amazing given what's going on. So I think we had a festival without it, and I think probably other people have found this. I mean, I think the value of the sponsorship is about 85,000 in total, but you sort of, well, how much cash is there? And actually, I think the cash is actually about 32,000 because of all the other things they want. But I think it's, you know, it's about our bargaining really. So that they will bring a lot of added value, but we would have still had a festival this year, but the council's tailoring, reducing the funding, so 2 years' time there won't be any, but there will be, hopefully. I mean, there's, what, 175,000 coming this year, so I hope that, you know, you've built up your market big enough with the funding then to get other sponsors, unless capitalism collapses completely, which of course is a possibility.
Can I just ask, is anybody else, do they have public funding as a festival, or over at the back? And what's your situation at the moment? Are you facing a cut?
Hello, Andrew Wood from England Music Live, which is a 3-day festival, 15,000 capacity each day. Yeah, we've had a significant reduction in the budget this year of 100,000 cut. But we do have a budget of £160,000. What we struggle with generally is getting the bands to avoid any exclusivities. And really, I'd like to know from Jim, but there are obviously similarities, Jim, with Evolution. We're on a £35 ticket, weekend ticket, and how do you get the bands that you want at your festival? When do you book the bands, and how do you avoid the exclusivities that are put on with likes of V and Leeds and Reading?
I'm trying to remember all three of those questions. We start booking in October. Really, we have our headliners in place if possible by mid-November. We try and target acts that we don't think will come under the exclusivity clauses. And part of the exclusivity things does go to the fact that Dave, my partner, works with these agents all year round. He's older than me. I'm 44. Between us, we've been doing it for 50 years, so we've got some great relationships with some really old, long-standing agents, which I know your booker has as well, because I do know Brian. I think you have to be careful. We fight quite hard to make sure we don't have exclusivities. One of the things, and I think you probably enjoy this as well, is that because we're in the North East, there isn't, I mean, we're the biggest event really that is like south of T in the Park and north of Leeds, you know, with obviously Rockness sort of around that area, but that's even further north actually. So, you know, we're fortunate in that, you know. sometimes I find now, and I've heard this from agents themselves, they'll use the exclusivity thing just because they don't want their artist to do your event for some reason or whatever. Sometimes the exclusives are only placed on the really big headliners that I wouldn't think that we could afford anyway. We do drive really hard. When we were free, we used to drive hard on the fact that, you know, any donations and any money we used to support Water Aid, and a lot of the bands used to do that. We still do charity donations to Water Aid, and that helps a little bit. Like I mentioned before, the fact that they're playing in that region, it's the only opportunity in that region where they'll get to play to 25,000 people. Sort of helps, you know, especially if it's someone like Plan B this year who's really keen on, you know, following through the momentum they've gained, not only from having a great album, but then, you know, winning a Brit Award and being all over the place, really. You just have to drive really hard, but I mean, you know, start early as well, start early. And then the other thing, it does go back to what I was joking about before, about having a, you know, not just having a 14-year-old son, but Dave's really in touch, more than me really, with what's coming through. And it's, you know, it's edging your bets on some of the stuff. So over the last years, like, you know, James mentioned, we booked the last year we were free, I think, we booked Dizzy, and the day he played for us, like, Bonkers went to #1. And a lot of people played Bonkers and thought it was Bonkers, and at first it struggled to get airplay because it was so different and so out there. And I think you've just got to be really careful and really forward thinking on the stuff that you're doing. And I think that's one way for an event your size to do it. Try and have a bit of forethought, start early, and really carefully look at what might be coming through. So when it comes to the time, then they are actually sort of doing well. One this year we had was Two Door Cinema Club, and a lot of people were like, well, who are they? And we were like, well, they've just sold out the last tour, and since we booked them, you know, they've been A-listed on Radio Wow, we've had a great selling album, they've been nominated for a load of awards, and they've sold out Brixton in a day. So, you know, you just got to be really forward thinking and choose your artists carefully. Don't necessarily go for the bigger names that are well known at that particular moment in time. Try and get one or two though, because that helps.
Can I chuck something in as well that brings it back a little bit to what the gentleman from Tramlines was saying, and also picks up on one of your tips from earlier on, James, on your crib sheet, which is how do we keep the artist bill down? One of the things that you can find out by researching audiences is the fact that half of them won't be there specifically for the music, they're there for the social element of it. And quite a lot of festivals have made a lot out of that. That helps bring down your artist bill, but you've got to kind of think of those nice little things like the bus and all this kind of thing, you know, social spaces where a bit of music will happen, that kind of thing, to actually make the whole thing a social experience. One of the things I sometimes teach students about, I'll say to them, we've got a 1,000 capacity event here and it's completely sold out. How many people have bought tickets? To which of course they all say 1,000, and I say no they haven't. Because half of them have bought stuff for the mates and kind of didn't particularly want to go, but all the friends are. So the social stuff is quite important to kind of keep the bill for the bands down. And I'm guessing Green Man has quite a lot of social stuff.
Well, yeah, I would agree with that. I know quite a few people who go to, and they went to Secret Garden Party, and they go every year, and I still what bands did you see? What? Didn't know to see any bands. Just went and just got involved with all the other stuff, you know, and had a great time.
Yeah, that's a great example of one of those festivals where I go regularly and I can't tell you the last act I saw there.
Too drunk, James?
No. But you know, all this ties in very well with, I mentioned the research that we've done into festival goers, and the top thing when it comes to choosing a festival is that like-minded people will be there and their friends will be there, and below that is the quality of the headliners. So it doesn't necessarily have to be about, you know, getting the Kings of Leon down there. It's about getting some good quality music, but making sure
that's
the right vibe.
because we're never going to get the Kings of Leon down there, are we?
Sorry, Fiona.
Just one thing, I mean, I run the Green Man on the same weekend as the V Festival, and occasionally we have artists that want to play both. And you know, I've heard various stories about people stopping artists playing at the festival, but I've made it very clear to the organisers of the V Festival that we really are not their competition. And I think they acknowledge that, and we have had artists who played both, and they, and put it this way, I always put in a courtesy call. but you know, it's worked for me so far. But again, I've heard other festival organisers of independent festivals who say things have not been like that, and it's been very difficult for them. So
there's been some discussion up here about it's really important to have long-term relationships with suppliers, or have a booker who's got great relationships with agents for the last 20 years or whatever. How about if you're a festival that's, you know, only a couple of years old? How do you get how are you able to take advantage of, you know, the kind of benefits that you can have if you have these long-standing relationships? Is it possible to do it, or do you have to hire in help, like from a more experienced booker perhaps, or?
Well, that's an option, and I think there's a few festivals that outsource booking to other people. I think if anybody was thinking about how am I going to get my festival in amongst all of these big, huge sort of, you know, monster festivals, you know, you need to either one, have a look at the landscape and decide that your idea has not been done yet. So you know, and I think that's where you guys with the likes of the so-called boutique festival sort of thing has happened in the last 10 years. Or, you know, regrettably, you have to pay more money. It's as simple as that. I think you need to appeal to the artist on different levels. I think Jim made a really good point, is that your A&R needs to be spot on. You know, you need to be prepared to back your gut and your instinct on certain acts. If you get them early, you know, I think we all had sort of stories. You know, 2004, 2003 for me was not a good year at all, and 2004 I booked a band, I paid £20,000 for them. I thought, oh my god, I'm paying too much money for them. And by the time my festival come around, they was the biggest act on the planet, and that was Scissor Sisters. You know, and they probably sold me more tickets than the artist that was paying over £100,000. You know, so you know, A&R and a bit of luck is really important.
Any other questions, please? Yep, great. Can we get a mic over this side? If you just let us know who you are and where you're from, would be great.
Yeah, my name's Eddie Faulkner. I run a small festival in East Yorkshire called Tribfest. Again, James, quite unique, really, and it's all tribute bands instead of the real bands. We've been running it now for about 4 or 5 years, well, about 50 years this year. We're sort of developing it by the hundreds, not the thousands, but it's going in the right direction. I'm just about to embark on a sort of advertising campaign, something like that. I mean, we've talked a lot about what happens within the festival, but pre-festival, you know, how do you guys, I mean, you've had a lot more experience than I have. How do you guys sort of go about, what tips and tricks really of obviously selling your festival and
The last thing you can do really is create press yourself. Think about quirky ideas which are pressy. I mean, a few years ago when I had no money, we invited a load of druids down to the Green Man Festival site, and they did a weather hand-holding thing. And, I mean, joking apart, we got so much press out of that. It was in the Times. Rollo Malfling, chief druid of Stonehenge, was interviewed by the Times. He loves me now, and will forever for that thing. But what I'm saying is, you know, you have to be inventive. No, that didn't really cost that much, but it brought us a lot in marketing.
Yeah, as an ex-journalist, I think what you've got there is a really quirky idea for features and things like that, so I'm sure you can do stuff.
Just to add to that as well, if I sit down with a PR working on the marketing of the festival, I sit down and say, what are the stories that we've got? Because sometimes, you know, you'll see festivals that will do the teaser kind of stuff, well, here's the lineup, more to be announced later, and they're really just keeping a story up the sleeve. Because what a PR hates is that you go out with your big story, big bang, that's it, and then you sit there a few weeks later going, oh, what are we going to say to them now? Well, work that out in advance, what the stories are, you know, that kind of, you know, add-on event that'll give you another bit of publicity.
yeah, we've just got 6 pages in Esquire magazine this month, so...
Well, there you go, excellent.
Sold out. Hopefully.
Any more questions, please? No? One thing I wanted to touch on, James, while we've got you here, which we didn't quite get a chance to in the other session, was looking at venture capital money. There are a number of companies out there. Ingenious, in particular, has just invested £1.5 million in launching 2 festivals, one in Bristol and one in Brighton. Now there is money out there. There seems to be people that want to invest lots of money into these venture capital trusts where they get a tax break for the money that they put in, if I'm understanding this right. It's slightly complicated, but James has a slightly better idea than I do, I think, 'cause you get some investment from engineers, don't you, for greenfields. They helped you to grow it. I just wondered if you could give a very quick outline as to what the benefits have been and what you might have had to give up as a result of taking that money.
Well, we were very fortunate. I met a guy 10 years ago, a guy called Patrick McKenna, and he was very keen to work with me, and he became a partner in my business and invested quite a significant amount of money in the cream business. We had to give up a percentage of the business in order to bring that cash in. The benefits was we had use of the cash, obviously, and I think we found a partner that was in as much as, I mean, there's a number of ways you can bring cash in. You can bring cash in via debt, but obviously I think if you read the business papers at the moment, I don't think any of us are that keen to do that, because you've got really very little control over when that debt would be called in by the banks, and also trying to convince the banks to invest in something as volatile and as subjective as the festival world. Well, certainly I'm not really keen to sort of go down that road. We swapped cash for shares in the business. The pros of it was obviously we found a partner that actually didn't want to interfere in the run of the business, left the run of the business to me and my team, so that was a benefit. The cons is that, which was the same as the pros, they didn't know anything about the business. So there was days when that was really useful to us, and then there was days when it wasn't useful to us, because trying to, I don't know, convince them that we're going to spend £50,000 or £100,000 on something because we thought it was a good idea. They'd want proof and, you know, a bit more reasoning behind that decision. But with time, you know, that relationship has been really, really good for us. And with time, they, as an investment house, have invested in a lot of festivals since then. Field Day, they're involved in a festival in London with me, which is called LED. They've just invested into a couple of festivals recently. Their current funds for investing into festivals are very complicated and do involve something called a VCT, which is I need to be careful, pick my words here, is an investment fund where individuals will invest into certain parts of the creative industries so they can benefit from a tax deferral scheme. So what that means is that our government has said to anybody who is wealthy is that if you invest into the creative industries in the UK, you would get a deferral on your tax for, I think, 15 years, the last time I heard. But the good news is that then allows the investors to go out and look for festivals, or they invest into movies, they was investing into music, but I don't think that's happening now. They are very choosy about what they invest into, because there is a guarantee on the money. You have to guarantee them a certain percentage of the money in return, and it's not just I'll sign a piece of paper and say give you the money. You need collateral, or you need assets to back up that guarantee. So it's good on one hand. You're able to access funds. You're able to access funds from the outside of the festival, but at the same time you have to go through a process of providing them with a guarantee, and if it all fails, you still have to return the vast majority of that investment. So, you know, it's a cash flow benefit. They do share in some of the risk, but not as, you know, two friends would share in the risk, because they do have first call on certain parts of the income. But the upside is there's not many people out there who are investing into music and investing into festivals, full stop. So I suppose in a way it's a good thing. It's worked for me on some shows, it's not worked for me on other shows. You know, I think it's a positive thing in the business. but I would caution that, you know, they are an investment house, so you are dealing with sort of people who are, you know, they're not bankers, but they're not festival promoters either. They're somewhere in the middle. So, but you know, it's been good, and you know, it might be something that would appeal to certain people. Don't ask me, if you don't mind. But they're called Ingenious Ventures, and you know, if you look them up on the website, you'll find them. And you know, if you've got a plan or an idea that you want to put forward to them, just send it to them.
Yeah, it's not just I'm not doing a sales pitch, by the way. This isn't this isn't a sales pitch. It's what I think is interesting is that, you know, I've talked about the 1.5 million for a couple of festivals and so on, but there's smaller sums as well, you know, maybe 40, 50 grand, that kind of thing, which might, if you have the right idea, might just help get you through or get your idea off the ground or get you to that next step where you want to be without, you know, with the bank not helping you, for example. It's just another.
There are other schemes, investment schemes as well, which are short term that you might, you know, end up, you know, borrowing over a period of, not of the bank, with an investor who's quite happy to see a 10% return over a year rather than like be in for the long haul as well. You know, so there are different ways.
I think even the VCTs are clipped at 3 years and 5 years, so they don't stick around forever. But you know, if you're successful, you have to buy them out. So it is a structured investment, but they're not. I think the maximum they can stay is for 5 years.
And they do get it wrong. I had to chat with Paul from Ingenious once, and he was telling me about how he collated some footballers' money and invested it in a really crap film called Avatar, and they all made a return on it. But he also said to me, like, he goes, I went to America once and I had this meeting with these people, and they were trying to get me to put money into this film about 2 gay cowboys.
I do think eventually all of these schemes will come under pressure from the government at some point, because they are costing the exchequer tax, you know. So you know, I wouldn't call them loopholes. They're incentives for people to invest into. I mean, it started with the movie industry, but if they pull the film council, they'll pull everything else eventually.
I think one other way, just quickly before we wrap up, that festivals can get can benefit is by working together. Jim and James are both members, and Fiona are all members of the Association of Independent Festivals, but there's you know, a variety of ways, formal or informal, that festivals can club together, either by both booking the same acts and sort of and creating economies of scale that way. For example, you know, obviously not next door to each other, but you know, if you partner up from someone from up here with someone down in Brighton, for example, having those relationships with the festivals and leveraging that kind of activity really can bring benefits, you know, in a variety of different ways. I don't know if anybody's got any examples of that. I don't know if anybody else. Is anybody working with any other festivals?
Can we how the twinning scheme works with the AI? So they do festival twinning with other festivals internationally?
Come on.
Fiona, have you got a twin? We're probably the three of the only ones who don't have a twin, because
well,
I'm too busy worrying about a festival in Slovakia.
For those people who don't know, I'll try and summarise it as professionally as I can. No. The idea is that independent festivals in the UK forge relationships with similar independent festivals in Europe, you know, festivals with similar lineups, for example, or similar demographics, so you cross-market to each other. So, you know, British festivals will market an audience to their audience about a festival in Norway, for example, you know, where there might be some crossover, and vice versa. So it's about bringing tourists to your festival. Have I understood that right? Is that succinct enough?
Yeah.
That's basically it. So it's that kind of cooperation idea about spreading the word, because so many British festival goers go abroad. I think the idea is to try and bring some of them back over here. Great. Well, listen, I'm going to wrap up. I just want to finish on the fact that we have been talking an awful lot about financial pressures and about how how times are tough at the moment. But what's really important to remember is that festivals still represent probably the best value for money ticket you can buy out there if you want to go and see some live music and have a good time. You know, for even if your festival costs 150, 160 quid a ticket, you're still seeing so many bands of such top quality that if you had to go and pay to see them individually, you'd be broke. You know, you'd be nowhere near that kind of price. And you know, that's something that is I guess, is really important to remember. And I'm sure festivals, I don't know how much you guys do it, but push that message across to the punters, because you know, you so often hear, oh, 100 quid for a ticket, that's really expensive. Well, come on, what are you getting? You're getting an amazing holiday, aren't you? And having an absolutely fantastic weekend for 100 quid, it's really not that much. So anyway, rant over. Shall we go to the bar? Thank you everybody for coming. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you to Academy Music Group and to Doodson's and to Tuborg and for everybody that's spoken and contributed their knowledge. Let's go and have a drink.